My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 27 years old, and on that day, a Tuesday in October, the Manhattan air was cold enough for me to feel the wind slice across my face the second I stepped out of the car. New York has this specific smell in the fall. Chestnuts roasting on street carts, fresh coffee drifting out of shop doors, and that cold that enters through your nose and makes you feel alive. I was wearing a black overcoat. Simple, elegant, no visible brand. My hair straight, black, falling past my shoulders. No heavy makeup, no flashy jewelry. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone that morning. Or at least that's what I thought. The café was called Maison Dorée, one of those places tucked into the ground floor of a mirrored glass commercial building on Park Avenue. The kind of place where an espresso costs $16 and nobody complains. Where the waiters speak softly, where silence is practically a requirement. I walked in because I needed a quiet place before my meeting. A meeting that could change the entire trajectory of a company. A meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Meridian Ventures office, 3 blocks away. But that, they didn't know. Nobody in there knew. The interior of Maison Dorée was exactly what you'd imagine. White marble tables, chairs upholstered in dark green velvet, golden light pouring from pendant lamps that looked like drops of honey frozen in mid-air. The scent of fresh croissants mixed with vanilla and freshly ground coffee. It wasn't crowded. An elderly couple in a corner, a blonde woman typing on a laptop near the window, and at a round table, closer to the center, 2 men. One of them I noticed first, not because I wanted to, but because he was staring at me. He was tall, broad shoulders filling a navy blue suit that looked like it had been custom cut. Dark brown hair combed to the side, a defined jawline. Light eyes, green or blue, I couldn't tell from that distance. He was holding a coffee cup in one hand and resting his chin on the other, and he was looking directly at me. I looked away, went to the counter, ordered an almond milk latte and a blueberry muffin, paid, waited. Felt the entire time that gaze on my back. It wasn't a disrespectful look. It was curious, interested, like he was trying to figure something out about me without asking. I grabbed my coffee, walked to a table near the glass wall facing the street, sat down and opened my tablet. I had a financial report I needed to review before the meeting. Numbers, projections, risk margins. It was a normal morning, quiet, almost beautiful. Until my phone rang. It was Grace, my personal assistant. Naomi, the school called. Noah had an anxiety episode. He's crying and asking to see you. They tried to calm him down, but he wants his mom. My heart clenched. Noah. My son. My entire world compressed into a 7-year-old boy with eyes too big and a heart too sensitive for this world. Since his father left, no warning, no explanation, not even a note. Noah had episodes, not every week. But when they came, they hit hard. And he only wanted one thing, me. Have him brought here, I said. Ask the driver to pick him up from school and bring him to the cafe. I can't leave right now. I need to review the documents before the meeting. Are you sure? Grace asked. I'm sure. He'll stay with me until it's time for the meeting. Then you take him home. I hung up, took a deep breath, went back to the report, but my mind was no longer on the numbers. It was on Noah, on his face, on his wet eyes, on the way he presses his lips together when he's trying not to cry. 15 minutes passed, and then the cafe door opened, and he walked in, small, blue backpack on his shoulders, red jacket. Sneakers he'd picked out himself, white with gold details because he said they looked like a superhero's. He saw me, and his face lit up, like the sun had risen again just for him. Mommy! He ran between the tables, almost tripped on a chair, and threw himself into my arms so hard he nearly knocked over my coffee. I held him, squeezed him tight, kissed the top of his head. Breathed in the smell of children's shampoo mixed with that unique scent every child has, the one only a mother recognizes. "It's okay, baby," I whispered. Mommy's here." He didn't say a word. He just stayed there, clinging to me, breathing slowly. And I stayed there holding him, forgetting the world for 30 seconds. It was the most beautiful moment of my morning, and it was that exact moment that ruined everything. Because while I was hugging my son, the man in the navy blue suit was still watching, and his friend, a shorter man, thinning blonde hair, red face, tie too loose for a place like that, was watching too, but not in the same way. The friend leaned forward, got close to the suited man's ear, and spoke. He didn't whisper. He spoke, in a tone he thought was low, but the acoustics of that marble and glass room carried straight to me. "See that? She's probably just another one of those poor, desperate women looking for a man to support her and her kid." He laughed after, a short little chuckle, like he'd cracked a joke. The man in the suit didn't laugh, but he didn't say anything either. He looked away, took a sip of his coffee, and stayed silent. And that silence hurt more than the words, because the words came from an idiot. But the silence came from someone who could have said something, and chose not to. Noah lifted his head from my chest, looked up at me, and asked in that tiny voice only a child has, "Mommy, what did that man say?" My stomach dropped. "Nothing, sweetheart," I said. I smiled, a smile that cost me everything I had inside. He didn't say anything. Noah looked at me for one more second, then rested his head on my shoulder again, and I just sat there, holding my son with one hand and holding my rage with the other. The waiter walked past their table. Did he hear? Maybe. Did he do anything? No. The blonde woman at her laptop looked up over her screen, looked at me, looked at them, and went back to typing. Nobody said a thing. Nobody ever does. I picked up my tablet, closed the report, looked at my reflection in the window and saw my own face staring back, and I thought they have no idea. No idea who I am, what I've built, what I carry. What's going to happen in a few hours when that man in the navy blue suit walks into that conference room and sees my face on the other side of the table? I took a deep breath, ran my hand over Noah's hair, and I decided I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't make a scene. I wouldn't give them the pleasure of seeing me lose control. I was going to do something far worse. I was going to let the truth do the work for me. I should have left. I should have picked up Noah, grabbed my bag, and walked out of that cafe without looking back. But something inside me, maybe pride, maybe stubbornness, maybe the part of me that was tired of running from rooms I had every right to be in, made me stay. So I stayed. I ordered Noah a hot chocolate and a cookie. I wiped his tears with my thumb. I told him a silly story about a dragon who was afraid of butterflies, and he laughed. That little laugh that sounds like bells. The one that can fix anything broken inside of me. For a few minutes, the world was just us. Then she walked in. Blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, red lipstick that looked like it had been applied with surgical precision, a white blazer over a black dress, heels so sharp they clicked against the marble floor like a metronome. She walked straight to the table where the two men sat. The man in the navy blue suit stood up and kissed her cheek. The shorter one waved lazily. She sat down, crossed her legs, and immediately her eyes swept the room, scanning, measuring, judging every surface, every person, every detail. And then her gaze landed on me, on us, on Noah, who was sitting on my lap now, sipping hot chocolate with both hands wrapped around the cup. She stared for a long moment, then leaned toward the shorter man and said something. He nodded, laughed again, that same ugly little laugh, and she smiled, a thin, sharp smile that had nothing warm in it. I looked away, focused on Noah, told myself it didn't matter, but it did. 5 minutes later, the waiter came to my table, a young man, maybe 22, nervous eyes. He leaned in close and spoke quietly. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but there's been a complaint. Another guest mentioned that your child is being disruptive. Would you mind keeping him quieter? Or perhaps relocating to one of our less formal areas?" I blinked. Noah hadn't made a single loud noise. He was sitting on my lap drinking hot chocolate, whispering to me about his friend Marcus at school. Disruptive? I repeated. The waiter swallowed. I'm just relaying the message, ma'am. I looked past him. The woman in the white blazer was watching. She caught my eye and didn't look away. She tilted her head slightly, like she was waiting to see what I'd do. My son is perfectly quiet, I said. We're not going anywhere. The waiter nodded quickly, clearly relieved to escape, and disappeared behind the counter. Noah looked up at me. Are we in trouble, Mommy? No, baby. We're not in trouble. Drink your chocolate. He went back to his cup, but I could feel his little body tense against mine. Children absorb everything. They might not understand the words, but they feel the energy. They feel when their mother is being made smaller. I thought it was over. I thought they'd gotten their little victory and would leave me alone. I was wrong. A few minutes later, the woman stood up. She said something to the two men, picked up her coffee, and walked across the room. Not toward the bathroom, not toward the counter, toward me. She stopped right next to my table, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp like crushed roses mixed with alcohol. Excuse me, she said. Her voice was polished, controlled. The kind of voice that knows exactly how to wound while sounding perfectly polite. Is this your child? I looked up at her. Yes. He's adorable. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. It's just, this isn't really the kind of place for children, you know. Most of us come here to work, to have quiet meetings, you understand. He's being quiet, I said. Of course, I'm just saying. She tilted her head again. That same condescending angle. There are plenty of family-friendly cafes a few blocks down. McDonald's has a play area, I think. He might be more comfortable there. McDonald's. She said it the way someone offers directions to a homeless person. Helpful tone, devastating meaning. Noah looked up. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. He understood the word McDonald's. He understood the way she was looking at us. He understood that this woman wanted us gone. Mommy? He whispered. I put my hand on his back. Steady. Warm. My anchor. We're fine right here, I said to her. My voice didn't shake. I made sure of that. Thank you for your concern. She raised her eyebrows. I was just trying to help. You weren't, I said quietly. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. She wasn't used to hearing no delivered softly. She opened her mouth to respond, but then the shorter man called out from across the room. Victoria, leave it. She's not worth the effort. Not worth the effort. Those 4 words hit me like a slap. Not because they were true, but because they were said loud enough for every single person in that cafe to hear. And not a single person flinched. Victoria, because now I had a name for her, turned and walked back to the table. She sat down, crossed her legs again, and laughed at something the shorter man said. The elderly couple in the corner kept eating. The blonde woman at her laptop typed faster, as if the sound of keys could drown out what had just happened. The waiter behind the counter suddenly found something very interesting to clean. And me? I sat there, with my son's face buried in my neck, with the taste of iron in my mouth from biting the inside of my cheek so hard, with my hands trembling under the table where no one could see. Mommy, why was that lady mean? Noah's voice was so small, so fragile, like a thread that could snap at any moment. Some people are just like that, baby, I said. It has nothing to do with us. Do we have to go? No. But she said, I don't care what she said. I pulled back and looked into his eyes, those big, brown, beautiful eyes that looked just like mine. We belong here. We belong anywhere we choose to be. Do you understand me? He nodded, but I could see it, the doubt, the seed that someone had just planted in my son's mind. The idea that maybe there were places in this world where people like us didn't belong. That's what hurt the most. Not the words directed at me. I've heard worse. I've survived worse. But watching someone plant that seed in my child's mind, that was the thing that made my blood turn to fire. I looked down at my phone. It was 11:45 in the morning. The meeting was at 2. In just over 2 hours, I would walk into the Meridian Ventures conference room on the 32nd floor of a building 4 blocks away. I would sit down, I would open my portfolio, and I would decide whether or not to invest $12 million into a company that was bleeding money and desperate for a lifeline. A company whose representatives were currently sitting 15 feet away from me, laughing about the desperate single mother with her kid. They had no idea. The man in the navy blue suit, I would later learn his name was Garrett Mitchell, co-founder and CEO of a tech startup called Axion Analytics. The shorter one was Derek Boyle, his CFO. And Victoria Hale, their head of business development. 3 people, 1 company. 1 meeting that would determine whether their startup survived the next fiscal quarter. And they had just humiliated the woman holding the checkbook. I almost laughed. Almost. But I didn't, because Noah was still in my arms, and the weight of what had happened was still pressing on my chest like a stone. I kissed my son's forehead. I closed my tablet. I texted Grace. Come pick up Noah in 30 minutes and call Martin. Tell him I want the full file on Axion Analytics on my desk before the meeting. Every detail, every number, every name. Grace replied in seconds. Everything okay? I looked across the room. Derek was showing Victoria something on his phone. They were both laughing. Garrett was staring into his coffee, quiet. He hadn't laughed once, but he hadn't spoken up either. And in my world, silence in the face of injustice is just a quieter form of cruelty. I typed back to Grace. Everything is perfect. Grace arrived 26 minutes later. She walked into the café in her usual way. Quiet, efficient, invisible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But I was paying attention. I always am. She knelt beside our table and smiled at Noah. Hey, little man, want to go get ice cream with me? Noah's eyes lit up. He looked at me for permission. Go ahead, baby, I said. Mommy has some work to do. I'll see you tonight, okay? He slid off my lap, grabbed Grace's hand, and then stopped. Turned around. Looked at me with those enormous brown eyes. Mommy? Yeah. You're the prettiest person in this whole place. My throat closed. My eyes burned. I blinked hard and smiled. Thank you, baby. Now go get your ice cream. He grinned and walked out with Grace, his little sneakers squeaking on the marble floor. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the softest part of me left the room. What remained was something else entirely. I sat there for another moment. Still. Quiet. I could feel the shift inside me, like a door closing and another one opening. The mother had stepped aside. The woman who built a 12-figure investment portfolio before her 27th birthday was stepping forward. I picked up my phone and called Martin, my senior analyst. Tell me everything about Axion Analytics, I said. We already compiled the brief last week. Tech startup, founded 3 years ago. AI-driven data platform for corporate logistics. Innovative product, solid concept, terrible execution. They burned through their Series A in 18 months. Revenue is stagnant. They've been turned down by 4 other investment firms this year. Meridian Ventures is brokering the introduction to us because they owe Garrett Mitchell a favor from a previous deal. Garrett Mitchell, I repeated. I looked across the room. He was still there, still nursing that coffee, still quiet. Yeah, CEO and co-founder, Harvard MBA. Comes from old money but chose to build his own thing. His partner is Derek Boyle, the CFO, and they recently brought on a Victoria Hale as head of business development. I've met them, I said. Oh, already? How are they? I paused. Interesting. Martin waited. He knew me well enough to know that interesting meant something very specific. Send me the full file, everything. And Martin, dig deeper on the internal culture. Employee reviews, Glassdoor, any complaints. Anything about how they treat people. Looking for something specific? Character, I said. I'm looking for character. I hung up and placed my phone face down on the marble table. Across the room, Derek was now on a call, pacing near the window, gesturing with his free hand like he was conducting an invisible orchestra. Victoria was reapplying her lipstick using her phone screen as a mirror, and Garrett was looking at me again. This time, I didn't look away. Our eyes met for 3 full seconds. His expression was unreadable, not hostile, not mocking, something else, something heavier. If I had to name it, I'd call it guilt. He looked away first. Good. I gathered my things and stood up. I needed air. I needed to walk. I needed to feel the concrete under my feet and let the city noise drown out the echo of those words still bouncing inside my skull. Not worth the effort. Desperate single mother. I pushed through the glass door and stepped onto Park Avenue. The October wind hit my face and I let it. Cold, sharp, alive. I started walking north. No destination, just movement. 3 blocks later, I stopped in front of the Meridian Ventures building. 38 floors of steel and glass reaching into a gray sky. Somewhere up there, in a conference room I'd sat in before, a table was being prepared. Water bottles placed at perfect intervals, printed agendas stacked neatly, a projector warming up, all for a meeting that could save a dying company. My company, Carter Capital Group, managed over $3 billion in assets. I'd started it at 23 with a small inheritance from my grandmother, a mathematics degree from Columbia, and an almost reckless belief that I could see patterns in markets that other people missed. Within 2 years, I'd tripled every dollar. By 25, I was managing money for tech founders, retired athletes, and 2 very prominent families whose names I'll never say out loud. Nobody expected it from me. A young black woman with no Wall Street pedigree. No family connections on trading floors. No last name that opened doors. I opened my own doors. Every single one. And now, Axion Analytics needed me to open one for them. The question was, did they deserve it? My phone buzzed. A text from a number I recognized but hadn't seen in weeks. Naomi, it's James. I heard you're reviewing Axion Analytics. Can we talk before your meeting? It's important. James Whitfield, former managing director at Meridian Ventures. One of the few people in this industry who had believed in me early, back when I was still pitching from a folding table in a borrowed office. He had retired 6 months ago, but his instincts were still razor sharp. I called him. James, Naomi, thanks for calling back. His voice was warm. It always was. James was 71, black, and had survived 40 years on Wall Street by being twice as smart, twice as calm, and twice as prepared as everyone else in the room. He was the closest thing I had to a mentor. What do you know about Axion? I asked. I know their product is genuinely good. The AI platform has real potential, but the leadership... He paused. Garrett Mitchell is talented but weak. He lets the people around him dictate the culture. And the people around him, particularly Boyle, are poison. What kind of poison? The quiet kind. The kind that smiles at you in meetings and talks about you in hallways. There have been whispers. 2 women left the company last year. One filed an internal complaint about discriminatory comments. It was buried. My jaw tightened. Buried by whom? Boyle handled it, made it disappear. Mitchell either didn't know or didn't want to know. Either way, it tells you something. It tells me everything. James was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Naomi, you have every right to walk away from this deal. Nobody would blame you. I know. But... I stared up at the building. At the glass reflecting the clouds. But walking away means they learn nothing. It means they keep going, keep treating people like they treated me this morning, keep burying complaints, keep laughing. What happened this morning? I told him. Everything. The café, the comment, Victoria, McDonald's, Noah's face, the silence. James didn't interrupt. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long time. So what are you going to do? He asked finally. I'm going to that meeting. And I'm going to make sure they never forget it. James let out a slow breath. That's my girl. A pause. Naomi. One more thing. Yeah? The Meridian partner chairing the meeting is Linda Zhao. She's fair, she's sharp, and she doesn't tolerate nonsense. If things go sideways, she'll be in your corner. Good to know. Go get them, Naomi. I hung up, stood there for another minute, letting the wind pull at my coat. Then I turned around and walked back south toward my office 3 blocks away. I had 2 hours. 2 hours to review every number, every chart, every projection. 2 hours to prepare not just a financial analysis, but a lesson. Because this meeting was no longer just about money, it was about truth. It was about making 3 people sit across a table from the woman they had dismissed, mocked, and tried to erase. And watching them realize, slowly, painfully, irreversibly, that she held their future in her hands. At 12:30, I walked into my office on the 28th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a clean desk, a single-framed photo of Noah on the shelf behind my chair. Martin had already sent the full file. I opened it and started reading. Revenue reports, cash burn rate, client retention numbers, employee turnover data, press clippings. And there it was, the Glassdoor reviews James had mentioned. Anonymous, but devastating. Leadership dismisses concerns from women and minorities. CFO made inappropriate comments about a client's appearance during a team meeting. Nobody said anything. Great product, toxic culture. If you're not a white man, you're invisible. I read every single one. Then I closed the file, sat back, and stared at Noah's photo. His little face, those superhero sneakers. Mommy, why was that lady mean? I stood up, straightened my coat, checked my reflection in the window, and for the first time all day I liked what I saw. Not a desperate mother, not a charity case, not someone who needed to be pointed toward McDonald's. A woman who built an empire with her mind, her math, and her refusal to be underestimated. And in 90 minutes, they would all know it. At exactly 1:47 p.m., I stepped into the elevator on the ground floor of the Meridian Ventures building. The doors closed. I pressed 32, and I watched my reflection in the polished steel as the numbers climbed. I had changed at my office, not into something flashier, not into something designed to intimidate. I chose a charcoal gray suit, tailored, understated, a white silk blouse underneath, simple gold earrings, my hair pulled back into a low bun, clean, precise, professional. I didn't want them to see power on my clothes. I wanted them to feel it in my presence. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. A long hallway stretched ahead of me. Gray carpet, white walls, glass doors at the end with the Meridian Ventures logo etched into them. I walked. My heels were quiet on the carpet. My heartbeat was not. Not because I was afraid, because I was ready. Linda Zhao met me at reception. She was exactly as James described. Sharp eyes, firm handshake, the kind of woman who could end a career with a single sentence delivered over a glass of wine. Naomi, wonderful to see you again. She smiled. It was genuine. They're already in the conference room. I have to warn you, they're nervous. They know how important this meeting is. They should be nervous, I said. Linda raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She led me down another hallway, past offices and meeting rooms, until we reached a set of frosted glass double doors. Ready? She asked. More than you know. She pushed the doors open. The conference room was large, a long rectangular table made of dark walnut, 12 leather chairs, a projector screen on the far wall already displaying the Axion Analytics logo, water bottles lined up with military precision, a tray of pastries no one had touched, and there they were. Derek Boyle saw me first. He was mid-sentence, leaning back in his chair with one arm draped over the backrest. When I walked in, his mouth stayed open for a half-second too long. His brain was working, trying to place me. I could almost see the gears turning behind his watery blue eyes. Victoria Hale was next. She was sitting to Derek's left, flipping through a printed presentation. She looked up, made eye contact, and I watched the recognition wash over her face like cold water. Her lips parted. Her hand froze mid-page. And then Garrett. Garrett Mitchell was standing by the window looking out at the skyline. He turned when Linda said, "Everyone, I'd like to introduce our potential investor, Naomi Carter, founder and CEO of Carter Capital Group." The room went silent. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that has weight, the kind that presses against your eardrums. Garrett's face went through 3 stages in the span of 2 seconds. First, confusion, then recognition. Then something that cracked through his composure like a fault line. Pure, absolute, devastating realization. It was him. The navy blue suit. The same man who had watched his friend call me a desperate single mother. The same man who had said nothing, who had sipped his coffee and looked away while his colleague turned me into a punchline. And now he was standing in front of me, needing my money to keep his company alive. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply extended my hand. "Mr. Mitchell." "It's a pleasure." He took my hand. His grip was unsteady. His palm was damp. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then managed, "Ms. Carter, thank you for taking this meeting." "Of course," I said. I turned to the others. "Please, sit." They sat, like children being told what to do by a teacher they hadn't expected. I took my seat at the head of the table. Linda sat to my right. Across from me, the 3 of them lined up like defendants in a courtroom. Derek's face had turned a shade of red I'd only seen on tomatoes. He was gripping his pen so tightly his knuckles were white. Victoria was staring at the table. She hadn't looked up since I walked in. Her red lipstick suddenly looked less like confidence and more like a mask that had stopped working. Garrett sat in the middle, still, pale, his jaw tight. "Let's begin," I said. I opened my portfolio, pulled out the printed analysis Martin had prepared, placed it on the table with a soft tap. "I've reviewed your financials extensively. Your Series A burn rate, your revenue trajectory, your client retention numbers." I paused. Let the silence sit for a beat. "I have questions." Derek cleared his throat. "Of course. We're happy to answer anything." His voice was different now, stripped of that lazy arrogance I'd heard at the café. Now it was tight, careful, like a man walking across thin ice. "Let's start with culture," I said. The word landed in the room like a grenade with a slow fuse. "Culture," Derek repeated. "Yes, I invest in people, Mr. Boyle, not just products. I need to understand the character of the team I'd be funding." I looked directly at him. "Tell me, how does Axion Analytics handle internal complaints, specifically complaints from women and minority employees?" Derek blinked. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Victoria shifted in her seat. She still hadn't looked at me. Garrett spoke. "We take all internal matters seriously. We have an HR protocol. 2 women left your company last year," I said, cutting him off gently but firmly. "One of them filed a complaint about discriminatory comments made by a senior leader. That complaint was, according to my sources, quietly dismissed. Can you explain that?" The silence that followed was so thick I could hear Derek breathing. Garrett looked at Derek. Derek looked at the table. Victoria looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. "I wasn't fully aware of the details of that situation," Garrett said slowly. "That concerns me, Mr. Mitchell. You're the CEO. If discriminatory behavior is happening inside your company and you're not fully aware, that's either negligence or complicity. Neither is acceptable to me." His jaw tightened. He nodded once. "You're right." 2 words. Simple, heavy. But I wasn't done. "Let me be transparent," I said. I folded my hands on the table. I was at Maison Dorée this morning. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. I was sitting by the window reviewing your financials, as a matter of fact, when my son arrived. He's 7. He'd had a difficult morning. He came to me because that's what children do. They go to their mothers. I looked at Derek. He was frozen. And while I was holding my son, comforting him, someone at a nearby table made a comment, loudly enough for me to hear. Something about a desperate single mother looking for a man to support her. Derek's pen slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the table. And then, I continued, shifting my gaze to Victoria, a woman approached me, suggested I take my child to McDonald's, told me this wasn't the kind of place for someone like me. Victoria's face drained of every drop of color, her perfect composure shattered. She opened her mouth, and for the first time, nothing polished came out. I didn't know who I was. I finished her sentence. That's exactly the point, Ms. Hale. You didn't know who I was, so you assumed. You assumed that a black woman with a child in a nice cafe must be out of place, must be poor, must be desperate, must belong somewhere else. My voice hadn't risen once. It was steady, measured, controlled, and that made it cut deeper than any shout ever could. The way you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you, that tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. I turned to Garrett. And you, Mr. Mitchell. You didn't say those words, but you heard them, and you said nothing. He held my gaze. His eyes were red at the edges, not from anger, from shame. You're right, he said again, quieter this time. I should have said something. I knew it was wrong the moment he said it, and I just sat there. Linda Zhao was watching all of this with her arms crossed and an expression that said she was filing away every word for later use. The room was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that silence, I felt something shift. Not just in the room. In me. The woman they had dismissed that morning was now the only person in the world who could save their company. And every single one of them knew it. The silence lasted 11 seconds. I know because I counted every single one. Then Derek Boyle did the worst thing he could have possibly done. He tried to save himself. Ms. Carter, I think there's been a misunderstanding. He straightened in his chair, pulling on that salesman's smile like a wrinkled shirt. What I said at the cafe, it was a joke, a stupid, careless joke. I didn't mean, Mr. Boyle. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Please don't insult me twice in one day. His mouth closed. The smile died. Linda Zhao uncrossed her arms and leaned forward. I think it's worth noting, she said, her voice cool as marble, that Carter Capital Group is the only firm willing to take this meeting. 4 others passed. If this investment doesn't happen, Axion Analytics has approximately 60 days of runway before you're forced to shut down or sell at a loss. 60 days. She laid it on the table like a death certificate. Derek's red face turned white. Victoria pressed her fingers against her temples. Garrett stared straight ahead, his jaw locked tight. So, Linda continued, looking at me, the floor is yours, Naomi. I stood up, slowly, walked to the window, looked out at Manhattan, at the grid of streets and glass and lives moving in every direction. Somewhere down there, Noah was probably eating ice cream with Grace, laughing about something silly, the cruelty of the morning already fading from his little mind. But it hadn't faded from mine. I turned back to face them. I'm going to be honest with you, I said. When I walked into that cafe this morning, I was ready to invest. Your product is strong. The AI platform has genuine potential. The market is there. The numbers, while imperfect, showed enough promise. I paused. But I don't invest in products. I invest in people. And what I saw today, not in the spreadsheets but in that cafe, told me more about your company than any pitch deck ever could. Victoria's eyes were glassy. She was blinking fast, staring at a fixed point on the table. Ms. Hale, you walked up to a stranger and her child and told her to go to McDonald's. Not because the child was loud, not because we were causing any disruption, but because you looked at me, at my skin, at my son, and decided we didn't belong. A tear slid down Victoria's cheek. She didn't wipe it. Mr. Boyle, you reduced me to a stereotype in front of your colleague, loudly enough for the entire cafe to hear, and you laughed, like it was entertainment. Derek was gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles were bone white. And Mr. Mitchell, I looked at Garrett. He met my gaze. He didn't flinch. You did none of those things, but you watched, and you stayed silent. And silence, when someone is being humiliated, is a choice. It's the choice to protect your own comfort over another person's dignity. Garrett swallowed hard. His eyes were wet now, not falling, but close. "You're right," he said. His voice was rough, stripped of every layer of corporate polish. "Everything you're saying is right, and I don't have an excuse. I sat there and I knew it was wrong and I did nothing. That's on me." He paused. Then he did something I did not expect. He stood up, looked at Derek, and said, "Derek, you're done." Derek's head snapped toward him. "What?" "This isn't the first time. It's just the first time someone important enough heard it, and I'm done pretending I don't see it." Garrett's voice was steady now. The trembling was gone. "You're out. Effective immediately. I'll have legal draft the separation agreement tonight." Derek sputtered. "You can't. Garrett, we built this together, and you've been tearing it apart. Every comment, every complaint you buried, every person who left because of you." Garrett shook his head. "It's over." Derek looked at Victoria for support. She wouldn't meet his eyes. He looked at Linda. She offered nothing. He looked at me, and whatever he saw in my face made him understand that there was no door left to walk through. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of the conference room without another word. The glass door swung shut behind him with a soft click that felt louder than a gunshot. The room recalibrated, like the air itself had changed composition. Garrett sat back down. He looked exhausted, like a man who had just pulled a tumor out of his own body with his bare hands. Then he turned to Victoria. "You owe Ms. Carter an apology, a real one." Victoria finally looked up. Her mascara had smudged under her left eye. Her perfect facade had crumbled completely. She turned to me. "Ms. Carter, I am so sorry." Her voice cracked. "What I said to you this morning was inexcusable. I looked at you and I made assumptions that were rooted in prejudice. There's no other word for it. I assumed I knew who you were because of how you looked, and I was wrong. Completely unforgivably wrong." She paused, took a shaky breath. "And your son, the fact that he was there, that he heard and saw all of that, I will carry that with me for a very long time." I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time that day I saw something human behind the armor, not enough to erase what she'd done, but enough to tell me the wound had landed where it needed to. "Thank you," I said. Nothing more. I sat back down, opened my portfolio again, and looked at Garrett. "Here's what I'm prepared to offer." His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected this. After everything, he had expected me to walk away. "I will invest $8 million into Axion Analytics. Not 12, 8. And it comes with conditions." I pulled out a single sheet of paper and slid it across the table. "First, a full independent review of your company culture, conducted by a third-party firm of my choosing. Every complaint that was buried gets reopened. Every employee who left under questionable circumstances gets contacted and heard." Garrett nodded. "Second, a new chief people officer, hired within 60 days, someone with experience in equity and inclusion. Non-negotiable." Another nod. "Third, Victoria Hale will personally lead a quarterly community outreach initiative, pro bono consulting for women-led startups, specifically women of color. You wanted to develop business, Ms. Hale. Here's your chance to develop something that actually matters." Victoria blinked, then nodded slowly. Something shifted behind her eyes, not resistance but the beginning of understanding. "And fourth," I looked at Garrett, "you never stay silent again, not in a meeting, not in a café, not anywhere. When you see something wrong, you speak. That's not a business condition. That's a human one." Garrett held my gaze for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "You have my word." The meeting ended at 3:42 p.m. Hands were shaken. Documents were initialed. Linda Zhao walked me to the elevator with a look on her face that I can only describe as admiration carved in stone. "That," she said, was the most extraordinary meeting I have ever witnessed. "It was just a Tuesday," I said. She laughed, a real laugh. "Naomi Carter, don't ever change." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, pressed the lobby button, and as the doors began to close, I caught one last glimpse of Garrett Mitchell standing at the end of the hallway, watching me go. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stood there, like a man who had been rearranged from the inside out. I picked Noah up at 7 that evening. Grace had taken him to the park after ice cream. He was tired, happy, smelling like grass and chocolate. I carried him to bed, tucked him in, and sat on the edge of his mattress while he fought to keep his eyes open. "Mommy?" "Yeah, baby? Did you have a good day at work?" I smiled. A real one this time, the first real one all day. "Yeah, baby. Mommy had a really good day." He smiled back. Then his eyes closed, and within seconds he was asleep, his little chest rising and falling, his superhero sneakers by the door. I sat there for a long time, watching him breathe, thinking about the morning, the café, the words, the silence, the meeting, the look on their faces, and I realized something. The greatest power I have isn't my money. It isn't my company. It isn't the ability to sign a check that saves or destroys someone's business. The greatest power I have is the ability to walk into a room where no one expects me to belong, and prove, without raising my voice, that I was always supposed to be there. So if you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel small, if someone ever looked at you, at your skin, your hair, your child, your clothes, and decided you didn't belong, I want you to hear me. You belong, wherever you are, wherever you choose to stand. You belong there. Don't let anyone move you from a table you have every right to sit at. Don't shrink, don't apologize, don't disappear. Let them underestimate you, let them laugh, let them assume, and then let the truth speak for itself. If this story touched your heart, leave me a comment. Tell me about a time someone underestimated you. I want to hear your story. Hit that like button if you believe every woman, every black woman, every mother, every person who's been judged by how they look, deserves to be seen for who they truly are. Subscribe to this channel. We tell these stories every week. Stories of strength, stories of justice, stories of women who were counted out and came back to change the room. Stay tuned for the next video, because the next story, it's even more powerful than this one. I promise you, you're not going to want to miss it. The end.